It is fantastic to have you with me today. Thanks for making time to be here. Today, we are going to answer the top 5 questions you need to answer before studying iridology. So this is going to be a bit of an introduction to constitutional iridology as well. I think this is a really important topic from the perspective of if you are brand new to iridology, maybe you've never had anything to do with it, you've heard about it, you don't really know what it is, you don't really know what it's capable of. This is a great way for you to kind of dip your toes in, get your feet wet, and get some good information about it. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of iridology, and there's many different iridology philosophies. Our focus today, especially and specifically, is going to be constitutional iridology. Now, why would that be? Because it is the most scientifically validated one. There are constantly studies being done that are proving it and developing the knowledge here. So why am I passionate about sharing this information with you and about teaching iridology? Well, my original training 45 years ago was in what we call North American iridology or Jensenian iridology. And my practice for the past 35 years, though, has been constitutional iridology. Now, why that shift? Why did I go from Jensenian to constitutional? That's because I found after using the Jensenian for about 10 years that it wasn't what I'd been taught it was. The proof was not in the pudding, so to speak. When I got frustrated enough with that, because I was taught that I could diagnose using Jensenian iridology, I got really frustrated because the diagnosing I was doing was not accurate. It wasn't working. I was about ready to leave iridology altogether when I was blessed with the opportunity to learn constitutional iridology. So I truly love doing iridology, and I love teaching constitutional iridology in a very holistic way. For those of you who are new to iridology, what I want you to watch for as we do this is the concept that we don't diagnose with iridology, but what we do is we use it to direct our work with our clients, to teach us what questions to ask, where to look for the root causes of their problems, and we use it to help us understand why lab tests are showing up the way they are, why our clients have the symptoms they've got. So in all of the years that I've been doing iridology, and I've been a holistic practitioner now for 45 years, I can't believe that. It's just so amazing, right? I have added so many other skills to my skill set beyond iridology with nutrition and herbology and so many other little things in there. And I incorporate all of those, at least to a certain extent, in my teaching. This is just a heads up that our next full course will be starting on February 27th, 2025. And so if you are a health professional, so it could be a herbalist, a nutrition coach, a naturopath, chiropractor, medical doctor, RN, functional nurse practitioner, anyone like that who has a college level anatomy and physiology under your belt already, and you're curious about learning more about iridology, we may want to be in touch one-on-one in a little while. So if you're interested in learning iridology, you've come to the right place. We're going to get you started and get you a little bit of a foundation today. If you're not a health professional, or if you don't have that solid college level anatomy and physiology course already completed, but you want to learn iridology, reach out to me and I'll coach you as to where you can get an excellent A&P course to get you ready to come into my iridology program. So just before we start looking at eye photos, I want to give some context to why I'm sharing all of this information tonight with you. One of my recent grads said it better than I ever could. This is Joyce Lee. She's a certified esthetician, clinical aromatherapist, chartered herbalist, and a nutritional consultant. She said, I took an iridology course from another school a few years ago, but I was left feeling inadequately trained and with no confidence in the material or my abilities to perform accurate assessments. Upon completion of Judith's course, I feel very confident in my abilities and excited to offer iridology services to my clients. This is an incredible value, highly recommended. So quick introduction as to who I am and what led me to put together that course that Joyce is talking about. I am a certified level 3 instructor with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. They've only been issuing badges for a few years. I started doing this kind of work in 1979, started studying in it in 1979, and started doing clinical work in 1981. I have studied under 8 different iridology instructors with 3 different styles. I was one of the first 3 in the world to be certified at the level 3, which was just introduced a few years ago. To date, there are only 10 of us who are certified level 3 instructors. Over the many years that I have been involved in holistic health, I have written and self-published many books. Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and Level 2. And the only book that is still currently available, and it is only available digitally to my students, is the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook. I've also created and taught many courses, a level 1 herbology and a level 2 herbology, mostly designed for home use. I've taught biokinesiology and color therapy, level 1 and level 2. I was a certified prenatal educator for a while, had fun teaching antenatal classes. And of course, I currently teach iridology courses, the basic course, level 1 and level 2, through the IPA, certified through IPA, and the level 3, which is the more advanced course, as well as several other courses that integrate iridology with other things. And so stay with me to the end of today's mini class to learn more about the dynamic iridology course that will be starting in February. I am also a holistic nutrition professional, and I'm associated with these 2 organizations, the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners. And I'm also a master herbalist. So I'm a member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. Okay, so what are the 5 questions we are going to address today? We're going to do 5 of them. What is iridology? Why does it work? What can it teach us? Why should health professionals use constitutional iridology? And how should it be used in clinical practice? Now, if you have other questions, I encourage you to drop those into the chat for our meeting. And if I can work them into the presentation, I absolutely will. So let's start with, what is constitutional iridology? The simple answer is, it is the study of the colored part of the iris. Now, I want you to notice it's pronounced iridology, not iridology. It's iridology, it's an iris, okay? And so with constitutional iridology, we are looking at things like the fiber structure, the color, different pigments. Now, we also know that modern iridologists include sclerology, and we also include an assessment of the pupil. So it's getting more and more complex. When I started in this 45 years ago, we only looked at the iris. And 30 to 35 years ago, we started adding in sclera. And in the last few years, we've started learning more and more about the pupil, the pupillary border. And so that is now being integrated into what we do with iridology. So we want to be very aware of all of these layers, but today we're really going to focus primarily on the iris. So why does iridology work? This is so fascinating. In your study of anatomy and physiology, you already know that the eyeball is our largest neural receptor. It is actually the end of a nerve, right? And it is through that optic nerve that messages are sent back to the brain for us to then interpret, right? The iris itself has 28,000 nerve endings, and we're not even sure what most of them do. The eyeball develops embryologically at the same time the nervous system does, because it's a part of the nervous system. So the nervous system knows what's going on. And if the nervous system knows that there is a glitch, we are going to see, glitch is maybe not the right word. If the nervous system is aware of an anomaly, a genetic anomaly, we are going to see an anomaly in the iris. And that's going to give us clues. Now, we don't see everything in the iris, right? I have a granddaughter who is severely handicapped, and severely autistic. And she's got the most beautiful clear blue eyes I've ever seen. There's nothing in her eyes that would make me think, oh, there's a challenge here. There's something that genetically is not quite right. Although the genetic testing has been done and we now know what the genes are that are causing her problems. And so when we can't see everything in the iris, but we can see a lot. When we see different markings, different fiber structures in the iris, it teaches us about some of the inherent potentials that body has. Now, they won't be guarantees, but they are potentials. Okay, and that's where we need to be asking questions and not telling the client what is wrong, but asking them for more information so we understand how the marking in the iris correlates to what their symptoms are. So what can iridology teach us? Well, again, we're focusing on the iris for today's appointment. The irides teach us about inherent predispositions. So things that have been passed down through the genes from the last 3 to 4 generations. So this particular set of eyes tells us this person is predisposed to spending a lot of time reacting in the sympathetic nervous system. Right? So that means that this woman spends a lot of time being a little anxious. She's always in fight, flight, or freeze. She's waiting for the next crisis, the next shoe to drop, the next bad thing to happen, right? Her body is always in that on position. So when we see something like this, then we probably want to support her with something broad like astragalus, right? A broad support for the nervous system. It's not going to change anything we see in her eyes, but it will help to manage her chemistry so that she's not always in that on the edge kind of waiting for something to happen. Giving her something like astragalus will help her to relax. Now, this person may also be predisposed to having the liver run her show. Now, that could show up as immune issues, blood symptoms, energy symptoms, allergies, hormonal issues, digestive issues, because the liver does over 500 different jobs. And all we see from her eyes is that her liver wants to have an attitude, right? And so this is where we need to ask questions and we need to listen carefully. You know, one of my first questions with my clients is always, what would you like my help with? Right? And they give me their shopping list of symptoms that they think are problems, and really they are just the messenger. Because of the extensive background I've got in anatomy and physiology, I can bunch them together and go, well, these symptoms are likely coming from here. These symptoms are likely coming from here. When I look at the eyes, I can then begin to understand why this client has the symptoms. So we really do have to understand anatomy and physiology in order to connect what we see in an iris with what the client's symptoms are. And this is why I require students coming into my course to have that college level anatomy and physiology course so that I know I can go deep. I'm not just talking about markings, of one marking is one problem. I'm able to help them work with connecting the markings to the symptoms and creating this very intricate pattern of what's going on, but do it very quickly. The eyes also teach us what questions to ask. So this client specifically came in with recurring bladder infections and allergies. So her eyes suggest an increased predisposition to allergies and infections in general because her liver may not want to do its job properly, right? Liver has immune functions. Liver has a lot to do with regulating allergies. And so this means that we want to work on a constitutional level. Rather than giving her a herbal remedy for bladder infections and a herbal remedy to placate allergy symptoms, I want to work deeper at that liver level to try to fix the chemistry, to try to balance out the chemistry so that her body can take care of its own infections and take care of its own allergies properly. So, you know, giving her a herb to fight an infection might be necessary. We need to get her to be comfortable, right? We need to take away the discomfort of the bladder infection or the discomfort of the congested sinuses, but that is only a Band-Aid. It's the same as giving her a medication, you know, a a sinus medication that will just dry up her sinuses, or an antibiotic that will only work on the bladder, right? Those are Band-Aids. We want to work deeper. So I would consider with this client using maybe some golden seal, which is a bitter herb that works well with getting the liver on track. But probably I'm not going to do anything beyond comfort measures for the bladder, because it's really only a messenger. There's also emotional reasons why a person would have a bladder infection, and maybe I need to spend some time working on emotions with my client. Interestingly, this was a client who'd been away from me for a few years, and clients do that. They come in for a few appointments and we get them feeling really well. And I know they're feeling well because they disappear. But in a few years later, when things are shifting, they're getting older, different symptoms are coming up for them, that's when they come back and we do some more appointments, get them feeling really good, and then they disappear again. So she had been away for a few years, and she only just reconnected with me in an absolute panic because she was breaking out in hives all over her body. Now, unfortunately, she waited too long. She'd had hives for like 4 or 5 days before she called me. And that meant that things were too far advanced for us to get rapid results with nutrition and herbs. So she ended up going to the urgent care clinic and ended up on a prescription for prednisone. Isn't that interesting, considering that I said earlier that her body functions in that fight or flight response, and she was really embedded in that. That was messing with her adrenal glands, because that's where the fight or flight response comes from. The prednisone settles those adrenal glands, right? It takes down the inflammation and it settles those adrenal glands. Had she reached out to me at the very first sign of hives, then, we might have been able to, we likely would have been able to put a stop to them, get her chemistry balanced very quickly. We probably would have been able to short circuit the problem quite nicely. Now, constitutional iridology does not enable us to diagnose. We cannot see a disease name in the eyes. And it's best used as a guide where the issues, to help us find where the issues might be. It also guides our questions. It informs our suggestions. Now, I want you to notice the languaging that I've been using here today. I have not said anything like, this person is toxic. You are going to see so many people online doing iris analysis, and they would take an eye like this that has so many browns and yellows and little brown flecks in it and so on, and they would say, oh, you're toxic. You really need to cleanse. And they would say, if this person was to take all these specialized and expensive herbal formulas, I'm not against herbs. I mean, I promote herbs too, right? But they would say that she would turn her eyes blue. That's a really old philosophy that has been disproved for decades, but people are still selling it, right? They would say this person has a congested liver. Well, based on her symptoms, I can tell you she probably does. And when I see her eyes, I know her liver is prone to being congested, but I can't see from the eyes that it is congested. I need the symptoms to corroborate what I see in her eyes. Is this making sense? If this is making sense, drop a comment in the chat and just let me know that this is making sense for you. I've even heard people describe eyes like this as, these eyes look so unhealthy. Well, we can't possibly know those things from looking at the iris alone. We need to have a conversation, and we need to find out what the client's symptoms are. We need to find out what they're already doing for their health. We need context to do an iris analysis. It's so important, so important. So what else can the iris teach us? Well, remember, the iris gives us inherent predispositions, and the sclera gives us dynamic situations. So when we have the iris, it's showing us what the genetic potentials are, but the sclera is showing us what this person is doing with it. In this case, this person inherited a very tight collarette, which suggests that she is predisposed to constipation and poor energy production. Now, I would never tell a client that what they should be feeling. Oh, you probably are so tired. You're probably so constipated. That's pretty much almost a diagnosis, right? Because truly, if she's constipated, she already knows it. If her energy is low, she already knows it. But she might have known that for years, and she may be doing a lot of things that are really right for her body. And so she's correcting the constipation on her own, and she's correcting her diet on her own. Now, this client was just like that. She was already very diet aware. She ate small meals with lots of vegetables, very little grain. She chose excellent protein sources. She was doing a good job overall. We added some digestive aids to her as they were appropriate, and that really helped to get things moving faster in the right direction. Her eyes suggest another predisposition, and this one is to allergies. Now, notice our prior eye that we looked at was prone to allergies. This one is also prone, even though they look nothing alike. I mean, this is where understanding the markings and the colors and the textures that we see makes the difference. So this person is prone to allergies, so particularly allergies of the mucous membrane. So I asked her, are you aware of, or do you know of any allergies? Do you suspect any allergies? And she said, yes, especially spring season allergies. So constitutionally, her irides overall suggest that she actually has a predisposition towards leaky gut. Even though she has no gut symptoms because she's worked on remediating the constipation and she's got that moving really well, she doesn't have any of the lower gut symptoms, but she also doesn't have any noticeable upper gut symptoms, right? So I could see from her eyes that her allergy predisposition was coming from the intestinal tract. So we needed to work on rebuilding her intestinal tract. We can use things like collagen. It's a beautiful way to begin supporting that intestinal tract. After a course of that, we used a few other herbs to support digestion on an even deeper level and got her to where she wasn't needing antihistamines in the spring anymore. So just looking at the eyes, asking questions, listening to symptoms, so important. Is this making sense? If this is making sense, drop me a comment in the chat box. What are you thinking? What questions are running through your head as we're doing this? So why should health professionals use constitutional iridology? Well, first and foremost, it helps us to assess our clients holistically. And so often if we are looking at a lab test, we're looking at one tiny piece of information, and it is only one tiny piece of information. We don't see how that one piece interacts with everything else. And so when we are doing an iris assessment, we want to look at the constitution first, not the nitpicky little things that are in the iris, but we want to look at the whole constitution because that gives us that foundation information that we can build our assessment on. We're only going to look at the minute details later on if it's necessary, and it's often not really all that necessary. We certainly don't need to dissect their eye bit by bit. We should use constitutional iridology because it helps us to see how to balance a client's chemistry using cleansing and nourishing. This is important. Again, we need to be aware of what the body wants to do genetically. That helps, and what it's doing physiologically right now. And that helps us to understand what our next steps need to be, right? This is really important because our work isn't to mimic what a doctor does. Our work is to understand what the root causes are and find ways to correct any imbalances that we can in those root causes. The constitutional iridology helps us to understand how to alter programs as warranted. So I'll see my client for the first time and we'll create a basic introductory program based on their needs and their goals. When I see them a month later, I'm going to be tweaking that program, maybe adding some extra dietary work, building their food intake in a particular way. I might want to add a supplement or two or take something away or adjust the amounts. And the eyes help us to understand that again as we view the eyes, as we ask the questions, as we understand what progress has the client made in the intervening time. Constitutional iridology helps us to avoid slicing and dicing or subdividing the body into tiny parts. It's generally not necessary to subdivide the body into tiny parts. So, for example, I know of one iridology map that talks about the kidney, but it also has a tiny area for the renal pelvis. Now, here's the catch. If the person has a problem with the renal pelvis, they're going to have a symptom, right? But I don't have a herb that works just on the renal pelvis. The herbs that I have that work on the renal system work on the whole kidney. So it does me no good to know it's renal pelvis, right? If I know they've got kidney issues and I've got lab tests they brought in that show me kidneys are out of balance and I see kidney indicators of any sort in their eyes, I know that I need to work on the kidneys. I don't need the minute detail, at least not for that one. To that end, it's really important, in my opinion, with all of my years of experience, that we use a simple iridology map. You will find a lot of iridology maps out there that are so complex. Each of these spaces in between these organs on most maps is filled with things like leg, hip, ankle kind of thing, or shoulder, hand, finger, or earlobe, or brow, or just things that we don't have a protocol for, and that for 95% of us have no metabolic activity. We want to focus on things that have a metabolically active profile. How does the liver interact with the lungs? How does the liver interact with the thyroid? We have the skin, it shows up in this outer rim. We've got the lymphatic system, we've got bone health, we've got organ and muscle health, we've got bronchioles, we've got intestinal tract, we've got stomach. So we've got all of the metabolically active tissues on this map. And that's what we want to be looking at. I'm not going to give a herb for a sore finger. The sore finger, why is it sore? Did you smash it with a hammer? Or has it been getting stiff and sore and it's inflamed? It's inflamed. Well, I don't have a herb for the finger, but I have herbs that will help to settle inflammation and clear out the acid that causes inflammation. And we can do dietary protocols to reduce the inflammation. So I don't need to see anything on an iris map that says you are genetically prone to having a sore finger, right? That's not, the map wouldn't be helpful that way. Does that make sense? If it does, let me know in the chat box. Let me know. So how should iridology be used in clinical practice? Well, let me give you an example here. So this is a female client in her mid-50s. She had been to see me some 20 odd years ago, and I didn't remember her. And what she said is, I have come back to see you because you fixed my other problem in one appointment. That was pretty good. That was pretty good, right? So now she's coming back. Now she has hot flashes. She's been having them for a few years. She's tried hormone replacement therapy. That has not worked. The hot flashes are interrupting her sleep, making her not feel rested, which she feels is affecting her mental health and her moods in general. She came to me wanting to get rid of the hot flashes. So her eyes take me in two directions. The first one is her nervous system. She also functions in the fight or flight mode. And so that tells me that the adrenals are going to be a little bit cranky or a little bit stressed in her case. She's, how many women in their 50s have had a peaceful, calm life, right? Most of us, by the time we hit our 50s, we've had so much stress and so much trauma that our adrenal glands are begging for mercy. Hers were. When the adrenals are out of balance, we are usually going to see hot flashes and a lot of other menopausal symptoms. Now, I also noticed she's got a lot of brown in her eyes, but specifically pigments like this. And there's another little one up here that tell me that her liver wants to run the show. Also, liver handles turning carbs into cholesterol, which we need to balance our hormones. Liver manages digesting of fats. Liver is where we store anger and we hold on to grudges. So these are all things to take into consideration. And I asked her, do you tend to hold a grudge? Do you tend to get angry? And she said, no, I've learned how to work with that. So that's good. She's got that under control, but I can still see her liver wants to mess with her chemistry because that's genetically how she was put together. So I recommended that she experiment. Her diet was really quite good and she's physically active. So I recommended that she experiment with giving up coffee for 10 days to see how that impacted things, because coffee is really hard on the adrenals and the liver, right? And so she did that. And when she came back for her next appointment, I said, how did it go? Did you do the experiment? She said, yes, I did. She said, it was great. You know, when I was off the coffee, I had almost no hot flashes. I said, that's fantastic. What do you want to do moving forward? And she said, 1 cup of coffee in the morning is the only vice I have. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I exercise, I eat clean foods, I make good food choices. I'm not giving up my coffee. What else could we do? I said, well, actually, you know what? There's not much, because you've already tried hormone replacement therapy. That wasn't even strong enough to deal with your coffee. And the caffeine in your coffee is stressing your adrenal glands. Coffee's a diuretic that's sucking B vitamins out of your body. So we could add B vitamins and it might help a little bit, but you're just going to be peeing them out most of the time. That just makes expensive pee. So we really don't have a supplement that is strong enough to override the impact of coffee when we're talking about this kind of an endocrine situation. And so she opted to leave on that note, and we left friends. You know, I just said, you know, I have nothing else that I can offer you that would be strong enough. So, but if there's ever anything I can do, or if you change your mind, please come back. I would love to work with you on this. There's lots of markers that can suggest liver insufficiencies in managing carbohydrates and in difficulties with managing blood lipids. She's got markers in her eyes that suggest circulatory challenges and insufficiency. She's got suggestions in her eyes that genetically her digestion's not great. The shape of her pupils suggests that she is prone to spinal subluxations that need to be addressed on an ongoing basis, because genetically her spine wants to be out of balance. And so those are all things that are in her eyes, but I didn't load that all onto her in that first appointment, right? Even in the second appointment, because that's not what she came to talk to me about. So instead of overwhelming her, we focused on, as I do with every client, their immediate concerns. What do you want help with now? How can I help you? Where do we need to go with this? Is this making sense? If it is, give me a makes sense in the comments box. All right, so here we have a gentleman. These photos were taken in 2014. These were taken in 2022. When he came to me in 2014, he was having some issues and I'd given him some guidelines, and he came in for a few appointments. Then he disappeared and he really didn't do his homework very well. He did not follow through, right? And we all do that. We're all human. We have times when we can follow instructions better and we're more motivated to implement changes. And we have times when it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, I know it's important, but it's not that important. And that's where he was when we met the first time. Different cameras, different lighting, right? That's why these are darker. These are brighter. That's why these look a duller gray blue. That's why these look a brighter blue. Different cameras, different lighting. We cannot use this as a before and after and say, oh my goodness, he did all this cleansing. Look at how his eyes are so much brighter. It doesn't work like that. So when he came to see me again in 2022, he had a diagnosis of being pre-diabetic. His hemoglobin A1C was hanging out over 7. We needed under 5.9 and preferably under 5.7. He had tried metformin, that gave him diarrhea. The doctor switched him to Glumetza, that was a little bit better, but he also had low potassium. He had elevated blood pressure, and the low potassium was because he was on hydrochlorothiazide as a diuretic for the elevated blood pressure. He was also on trandolapril and mylantorvastatin for cholesterol. And because he was on a blood pressure medication, he needed sildenafil or Viagra for erectile dysfunction. Oh my goodness, so many issues, right? And so many drugs. And so when we look at this, and also on glumetza and on Giardians, which is another oral insulin, And so we needed to work with him to get the hemoglobin A1C down and to get his cholesterol down. So we did this. What we know is that his blue eyes mean that he tends to have elevated systemic acid. And that's going to be aggravated by a low glomerular filtration rate, which is going to lead to inflammation, which is going to lead to an increased risk of insulin resistance. Are you following the logic here? And increased endothelin, which is a vasoconstrictor that we produce naturally, and reduced aldosterone. And that's going to increase the sodium in his blood, which will reduce the potassium in an effort to balance the fluids. And his eyes show me he potentially has an underacid stomach. So we needed to talk about reflux as well. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So where did we start? Because I can't tell him to stop a medication. That's not in my scope of practice. That would be practicing medicine without a license, and it's not something I can do. So I had to instruct him that as we worked, he should go back to his doctor every 6 months and get his lab tests redone so that we could see what progress he was making. So we suggested adding more vegetables because his diet didn't have very many vegetables. We suggested including fermented vegetables. We added protein at breakfast, so we got him off the sweet roll with the coffee for breakfast, got him off that, got him to have protein and vegetables for breakfast, got him to eliminate his coffee, increase the vegetables, especially his leafy greens. And we started underscoring for him the importance of doing some resistance training to build muscle, burn fat, and help improve the insulin resistance. Supplement-wise, I gave him L-arginine as a vasodilator to help reduce the blood pressure, and berberine, which works specifically with the liver to aid with insulin acceptance. And there's lots of scientific studies out there that talk about how berberine is really great for helping almost, I don't want to compare it to a drug, but it does help the body accept insulin more readily. After 3 months, okay, so remember his hemoglobin A1C was floating in the low 7s, right? After just 3 months, he was motivated. He did not want to be on these drugs. He did not want to have elevated blood pressure or high cholesterol, and he absolutely didn't want diabetes. We got his hemoglobin A1C down to 5.9. So instead of being diabetic, solidly diabetic for that reading, he is now high risk of diabetes, like he's pre-diabetic, right? So the doctor had told him that if his numbers kept improving, they would begin to remove medications. Now, I also noticed that he was constantly clearing his throat just a little all through our appointment. And that to me is always a sign of reflux, right? Of low stomach acid reflux. So we tweaked his program in his second appointment, gave him something to help with digestion, both proteins and foods in general, kept him on berberine and L-arginine. I suggested getting assessed by an osteopath or a chiropractor who could check him for a locked diaphragm, right? Because that will often be the cause of low stomach acid reflux. After 6 months, the doctor started pulling medications. So 6 months after we started working together, the doctor removed the hydrochlorothiazide, one of the blood pressure meds, and the Lumetza. Right, we continue to work together. He is down to, I think, 2 medications, and all of his numbers are now in the high normal range. And we continue to work to get him into a solid mid-range normal on all of his numbers. Very exciting to see that understanding his eyes, understanding the risks that his eyes suggest and the predispositions that his eyes suggest guided what we needed to do, that in his lab tests, right? So how do we use iridology? We use it to guide our questions, to create rapport, and to inform our recommendations. And it doesn't matter what the eye looks like. The eye will always, when we know how to do this, guide our questions, help us create rapport, and inform the recommendations we need to make. Here is another client, and she's a 44-year-old female. She had a diagnosis of polycystic ovarian syndrome, also known as PCOS or PCOS. She has 2 children, ages 8 and 10. She's 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighs 275 pounds. So she's quite overweight. Now, 175 would probably be a much better weight for her. She's not happy with her weight, but she seems unable to lose it. She has hair growth where it doesn't belong on a woman. She has fatigue, she has depression, so she's on an antidepressant. Her menstrual cycles are not regular. She has them about every 4 to 6 weeks, but they're kind of all over the map. She was born without an ileocecal valve, and we can't necessarily see that on an eye map or on her eye photos. She has rosacea, that's an autoimmune, and she's worked with a nutritionist before, but that nutritionist had a one-size-fits-all program. Printed outlines of this is where we do what we do in our first appointment. This is what we do in our second appointment. And this client did not like that. So focusing only on markers that gave us information about what she wants help with, right? We only want to work with how do we get her hormones balanced to help her lose weight? The reason she's not losing weight is because of the PCOS, and because that always means there's some insulin resistance in there, right? And it means her liver's unhappy. So, and PCOS is a genetic predisposition, right? So she has what we consider to be a biliary constitution, which means that her liver wants to run the show. We've heard that with different eyes that we've looked at, even though they didn't look like these eyes. She also runs in that sympathetic response. So that tells us she burns through B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium. She's got brown pigments, extra brown pigments in her eyes, which tells us that she's got an increased risk for the MTHFR anomaly, which means she can't take regular B vitamins. They're not going to work for her. Her left iris, which is this one here, has right down here a little marking sitting in the ovary. And she's got another one over here too. Now, this does not mean, sorry, ovary is over here. My apologies. Over here. This does not mean, I read my notes wrong. Left iris at 24 minutes, right iris at 34 minutes. There we go. We got it now. There and there. And so it doesn't mean it doesn't guarantee her PCOS. It just means there's a predisposition to something with the ovaries. Now, when we look at her sclera, we see we've got a fungal labyrinth, and we've got teeny tiny fermentation signs here, which says she's not managing her carbs well. They're fermenting, they're likely fermenting in her body. She's got a little bit of a gentle yellow haze over her eyes, over her sclera, which again tells us that the liver's not happy, right? So that's all I needed to see. We got her going with a good methylated B complex, and we got her going with N-acetylcysteine, which is one of the most important antioxidants, amino acids that we can do for the liver and for a lot of other things in the body. Got her off her big box brand gummy melatonin. Got her off the gummy vitamin D and the gummy multivitamin, the gummy C. When you look at those gummy vitamins, they have so little nutrition and so much sugar and artificial stuff in them. Her food intake was sporadic and sloppy. So we were really starting from scratch to establish good nutrition. We had to start small. She wasn't hungry at breakfast, so I didn't worry about breakfast just yet. The goal was to get her to where she would be hungry at breakfast so she could eat a well-formulated breakfast. Lunch was a soup or a salad or a sandwich on white bread. I suggested homemade broth-based soup with a good amount of protein and vegetables in it. Supper was protein and vegetables. She used to have rice with this, and I had her take out the rice and add way more of the low-carb vegetables instead. Right. And asked her to start working on getting 2 liters or 2 quarts of water every day. I recommended that she start walking for 5 minutes after each meal and increase that by 2 minutes per walk every week. We had to start low, right? She was not in the habit of being physically active. If I had said go for a 30-minute walk after every meal, she wouldn't have. It was too big of a leap. But could she get a 5-minute walk in? Yeah, I go out the front door, down to the corner, back to my house. That's my 5 minutes. I'm done. Right. So it was easy to do when we started out little like that, and then had her build that. At the 4-week mark, when she came back, she said she really liked the diet. She said her digestion felt better, her energy was up, and her body shape was changing. She was talking about how loose her clothes were feeling in just 4 weeks. She was down 4 pounds. She'd never lost weight consistently, so she wasn't too excited about the 4 pounds. She was excited about her clothes fitting differently. She stopped the antidepressant on her own. She said she felt happier even without the antidepressant And her husband said he'd noticed that she was sleeping more peacefully. She was waking up with energy. So good. So we added some collagen to her program. 4 weeks later, she was down another 4 pounds. Now, she had never gone down consistently over 8 weeks. So now this was a big deal. Her clothes were getting really loose. She was down 2 full pant sizes. She went to the doctor and got her labs done. And the doctor said that they were the best they'd ever been and to keep doing what she was doing. She was on the right track, just keep going. So we kept building her program slowly. Next thing, we added some good omega-3 to her. And we just have kept working and building her program gradually and shaping her diet and shaping her physical activity, adding, taking away, doing whatever was needed at the time to take her up one more step. In order to create programs and client sessions using iridology, we must understand what the client wants help with. That's the first thing. We have to understand where they're starting from, and we have to understand how the body works, how organs work with or against each other. This is why it's so important to have that college level anatomy and physiology before you even try to learn iridology. It will make it so much easier, I promise you. We need that. We need to understand the order of importance for what to recommend, and we need to avoid overwhelming our client with too much information. With the exception of anatomy and physiology, I teach all of these things in the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course. We will integrate nutrition, a little bit of herbology, a little bit of aromatherapy. We'll talk about lifestyle, things that can happen. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a nutrition course. It's not a herb course. It's not a movement course, but we integrate that. So if you've got background in those things, we can draw on what you know, right? If you don't have A&P, reach out to me. I can connect you with a course that is run through a school, a nutrition school, and you can get that done and be prepared to join me in Dynamic Iridology. Our next course start date for Dynamic Iridology is February 27th. Registration is open, and there are more details on the website. I'm going to post this link in the chat box for you. I said I'm going to post this link in the chat box for you. Just a moment. I must have hit a wrong button. There we go. There we go. So you can pop over there and get more information about the course. And there's an invitation there if you've got the A&P for you to set up a time to chat with me about the course to see if it's a good fit. I only accept people who've got college level A&P under their belt, right? Because I want to go deep. I want to help my students not just learn markings, but learn how to use iridology to create an assessment and to create programs that will work for their clients. And to do that quickly and easily, not seeing the client and going off and spending 3 hours doing research and writing up a fancy report and doing an assessment and then bringing that back, or worse yet, emailing it to your client, right? I want you to be able to do your assessments and your protocol creations in your client sessions to get them done effectively. So the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System for Health Professionals is the only, is 20 lessons long, 2.5 hours of live webinar classes. We do 1 class per week, recorded for playback on demand. Okay, we always do small groups, and we always do the live classes, but you have the recordings if you need to come back to them. We have live group mentoring twice each month. These sessions are for you to bring questions and cases to us for us to discuss and for you to get support on. So while you're learning, even after you've finished the courses, even after you've certified, if you've got a case that you're struggling with or that's interesting or that you just want to talk about, you can bring it into our office hours. Sometimes we talk about things like business strategies, but these sessions are primarily driven by student need. So if my student has a question, if you've got a question, you bring it in and we answer it for you. These sessions are open to you, not just while you're in the program, but even after you've completed the program and even after you've graduated and certified. Now, we've just changed our alumni group. We are no longer on MeWe, but we do have a private social media platform just for my students and grads where we can ask questions, we can post comments, where we have our calendar of events. You also receive a 225-page digital textbook. You download it. The textbook is updated and adjustments are made to it as IPA dictates the curriculum needs to change. So you get to have that one without paying an extra fee. You also get the 45 pages of digital study notes, which you can download, and you can print up the textbook and the study notes if you'd like. If you're a hard copy kind of person, you can absolutely do that. I also include certification for IPA mentoring. Now, most teachers charge extra for this. I include it because I want you to do it. I want you to certify with IPA. There's a set protocol for what we need to do in order to be able to qualify for mentoring, and we follow that to the T to make sure that you have the qualifications you need to prepare for the certification exam, to sit for the exam. Okay. So if that kind of mentoring, if having online mentoring through a social media group, if having live mentoring in office hours in a webinar situation, if having some one-on-one mentoring for certification preparation appeals to you, drop a heart in the chat box. Let me know that those are things that sound like they would be valuable for you. This is one of my students. She is a certified iridologist now, and she's just working on certifying at level 3, which is very exciting. If you are wondering which iridology course to take, you can stop looking. You found it. Judith Cobb is an excellent instructor with many years of experience. She is a caring and compassionate person who is dedicated to the field of iridology and her students. I personally practice both Eastern and Western physiology medicine and was very impressed with the layout of her program. She makes it easy for her students to balance work, life, and study. Really, really appreciate that. And again, if you've already completed your college level anatomy and physiology, and you want to speak with me about the dynamic iridology course, go to that link that I just posted in the chat box. Hopefully you can all see that. And click on it. You'll see lots of information there. And if that all appeals to you, click the button to schedule a time to chat with me about the course. And we can talk about what it takes to get enrolled, what's involved, what you need to do time-wise to meet the requirements of the course. But let's talk about where you're at, what your goals are, how this will fit in. And if it's the right fit, we will get you enrolled. So with that, my friends, thank you so very much for being with me tonight. I truly appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.